True. Nervous. Very, very dreadfully nervous I had been and am. But why will you say that I am mad? The disease has sharpened my senses, not destroyed nor dulled them. Above all was a sense of hearing acute. I heard all things in the heavens and in the earth. I also heard many things in hell. How then am I mad? Hearken, and observe how healthily and how calmly I can tell you the whole story. It's impossible to say how the first idea entered my brain, but once conceived, it haunted me day and night. Object there was none. Passion there was none. I loved the old man. He had never wronged me. He had never given me insult. For his gold I had no desire. I think it was his eye. Oh yeah, it was his. He had the eye of a vulture. A pale blue with a film over it. Whenever it fell upon me, my blood ran cold, and so by degrees, very gradually, I made up my mind to take his life of the old man, and thus rid myself of the eye forever. Now, this is the point. You fancy me mad, but madmen know nothing. Oh, but you should have seen me. You should have seen how wisely I proceeded, with what caution, with what foresight, with what dissimulation I went to work. I was never kinder to the old man than during the whole week before I killed him. And every night about midnight, I turned the latch of his door and opened it. Oh, so gently I opened it. And then, when I made an opening sufficient for my head, I put in that dark lantern, all closed, and no light shone out. And then I thrust in my head, so that I might not disturb the old man's sleep. It took me an hour. I placed my whole head within the opening, so far that I could see him as he lay upon his bed. Would a madman have been so wise as this? And then, when my head was well in the room, I undid the lantern, cautiously, oh, so cautiously. Cautiously, for the hinges creaked. I undid it just so much that the single thin ray of light opened upon the vulture eye. And this I did for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 nights. Every night just at midnight. But I found the eye always closed, and so it was impossible to do the work. For it was not the old man who vexed me, but his evil eye. And every morning when the day broke, I went boldly into his chamber and spoke courageously to him, calling him by name, in a hearty tone, and inquiring how he passed the night. So you see, he would have been a very profound man indeed to suspect that every night just at 12, I looked upon him while he slept. Upon the 8th night, I was more than usually cautious in opening the door. A watch's minute hand moves more quickly than did mine. Never did before that night had I felt the extent of my own powers, of my sagacity. I could scarcely contain my feelings of triumph, to think that there I was, opening the door, little by little, and he not even to dream of my secret deeds or thoughts. I fairly chuckled at the idea, and perhaps he heard me, for he moved on the bed suddenly as if startled. Now you may think that I drew back, but no. His room was as black as pitch with a thick darkness, where the shutters were close fastened, through fear of robbers. And so I knew that he could not see the opening of that door, and I kept pushing it steadily, oh, steadily. Creeping in, I did. I had my head in and was about to open the lantern when my thumb slipped upon its unfastening, and the old man sprang out of bed. He said, "Who's there?" I kept quiet still, and I said nothing. For a whole hour, I did not move a muscle, and in the meantime, I did not hear him lie down. He was still sitting up in the bed listening, just as I have done night after night, hearkening to the death watches of the evil. Presently, I heard a slight groan, and I knew it was a groan of the mortal terror. It was not a groan of pain or of grief. Oh, no. It was a low, stifled sound that arises from the bottom of the soul when overcharged with awe. I knew that sound well. Many a night, just at midnight, when the world slept, it had welled up from my own bosom, deepening with its dreadful echo and the terrors that distracted me. As I say, I knew it well. I knew what that old man felt, and I pitied him. Although I chuckled at heart, I knew that he had been lying awake ever since the first slight noise when he had turned in the bed. His fears had become ever since growing upon him. He had been trying to fancy them causeless, but he could not. He had been saying to himself, "It is nothing but the wind in the chimney. It is only a mouse crossing on the floor. Or, it is merely a cricket which I didn't single chap. That's all it is, that's all." Oh, yeah. He had been trying to comfort himself with these suppositions. But he had found all in vain. All in vain, because death, in approaching him, had stalked with its black shadow before and enveloped the victim, and it was a mournful influence of the unperceived shadow that caused him to feel, although he neither saw nor heard, to feel the presence of my head within the room. When I waited a long time very patiently, without hearing him lie down, I resolved to a very, very little crevice in the lantern. So I opened it. You cannot imagine how stealthily, until at length a simple dim ray, like the thread of a spider, shone from out the crevice and fell full upon that vulture eye. It was open, wide open, and I grew furious as I gazed upon it. I saw it with perfect distinctness, all a dull blue, the hideous vein all over that chill, the very marrow in my bones, but I could see nothing else of the old man's face or person, for I had directed the ray as if by instinct, precisely upon that damned spot. Oh, and have I not told you what a mistake for madness is, but over acuteness of the senses? Now I say, there came to my ears a low, dull, black sound, such as a watch makes when enveloped in cotton. I knew that sound well, too. It was the beating of the old man's heart. It increased my fury as the beating of the drum stimulates the soldier into courage. But even yet I refrained and kept still. I scarcely breathed. I held the lantern motionless. I tried how steadily I could maintain the ray upon the eve. Meantime, the hellish tattoo of the heart increased. It grew quicker and quicker and louder and louder. Every instant, the old man's terror must have been extreme. It grew louder and louder and louder every moment. Do you mark me well? Have I told you that I am nervous? So I am. And now at the dead hour of the night, amid the dreadful silence of that old house, so strange a noise as this excited me to uncontrollable terror. Yet, you have no idea. For some minutes, I longer refrained and I stood still, but the greeting grew louder and louder and louder and louder and louder. heart must burst. And now a new anxiety seized me. The sound would be heard by a neighbor. The old man's time had come. With a loud yell, I threw in the lantern and leaped into the room. He shrieked once only, and in an instant I dragged him to the floor and pulled the heavy bed over him. Bye-bye, old man. I then smiled gaily to find the deed so far done. But for many times, for many minutes, the heart beat on with a muffled sound. This, however, did not vex me. It would not be heard through the wall. At length, it ceased. The old man was dead. I removed the bed, and I examined the corpse. Yes, he was stone dead. I placed my hand upon the heart and held it there many minutes. There was no pulsation. He was stone dead. His Eve would trouble me no more. By that I meant a sigh. If you think me mad, you will think no longer when I describe the wise precautions I took for the concealment of the body. The night was waned, and I worked hastily but in silence. First of all, I dismembered the corpse, cut off the head, and the arms, and the legs. I then took up 3 planks from the flooring of the chamber and deposited all between the scantlings. I then replaced the boards so cleverly, so cunningly, that no human eye, not even his, could have detected anything wrong. There was nothing to wash out, no stain of any kind, no blood, no spot whatever. I had been too wary for that. A tub had caught all. And then I left. When I had made an end of these labors, it was 4 o'clock, still dark as midnight. As the bell sounded the hour, there came a knocking at the street door. I went down to open it with a slight heart, for what I had now to fear. There entered 3 men, who introduced themselves with very perfect suavity as officers of the police. A shriek had been heard by a neighbor during the midnight. Suspicion of foul play had been aroused. Information had been lodged in the police office, and they, the officers, had been deputed to search the premises. I smiled. For what had I to fear? I bade the gentleman welcome. The shriek, I said, was my own, and the dream of the old man I mentioned was absent in the country. I took my visitors all over the house. I bade them search well. I led them at length to his chamber. I showed them his treasures, secure, undisturbed. In the enthusiasm of my confidence, I brought chairs into the room and desired them to rest from their fatigues, while I myself, in the wild audacity of my perfect triumph, placed my own seat upon the very spot beneath, which reposed the corpse of the victim. The officers were satisfied. My manners had convinced them, and I was singularly at ease. They sat. And while I answered cheerily, they chatted of familiar things. But ere long I felt myself getting pale and wished them gone. My head ached, and I fancied a ringing in my ears. But still they sat, and still they chatted. The ringing became more distinct. It continued and became more distinct. I talked more freely to get rid of the feeling. But it continued and gained definiteness. Until at length I found that the noise was not within my ears. No doubt I now grew very pale, but talked more fluently and with a heightened voice. Yet the sound increased, and what could I do? It was a low, dull, quick sound, much such a sound as a watch makes when enveloped in cotton. I gasped for breath. And yet the officers had heard it not. I talked more quickly, more vehemently, but the noise steadily increased. I rose and argued about trifles in a high key, and went to and fro, with heavy strides, as if excited to fear but the observation of the men. But the noise suddenly increased. Oh God, what could I do? I foamed, I raved, I swore. I swung the chair upon which I had been sitting and grated upon the boards, but the noise arose all over, the continually increased. It grew louder and louder and louder. And still the men chatted pleasantly and smiled. Was it possible they heard it not? Almighty God, no. They heard. They suspected. They knew. They were making a mockery of my horror. This I thought, and this I think. But anything was better than this agony. Anything was more tolerable than this decision. I could bear those hypocritical smiles no longer. I felt that I must scream or die. And now again, hark! Louder, 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 louder. Villains, I shrieked. Dissemble no more. I admit to the deed. Tear up the planks. Here, here. It's the beating of this idiot.